3 years later, a cold billionaire froze in court. His lawyer looked just like his ex, and the truth. The 42nd floor of the Harrington Tower gleamed like a monument to ambition. The ambient lighting of his penthouse office overlooked a picturesque Houston skyline, where glass and steel reached toward heaven while hiding the sins that built them. Cole stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection ghosted against the morning sky. A man who had everything except the one thing money couldn't buy: peace. What happens when 3 years of buried guilt meets 3 years of calculated revenge? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the Texas courtroom as billionaire Cole Harrington walked in, ready to crush another lawsuit against his empire. His $1,000 shoes clicked against marble floors that had witnessed countless battles, but none quite like this one brewing. But when the opposing attorney turned around, his blood ran cold. She looked exactly like the woman he'd abandoned 3 years ago. Every feature, every curve of her face, even the way she held her shoulders. It was impossible. Danielle was gone. She had to be. Naomi Pierce smiled and delivered her opening line with deadly calm. Mr. Harrington, you owe more than money. You owe the truth about the child you never knew existed. The entire courtroom went silent. Veteran officers of justice shifted in their seats, sensing something far more sinister than a simple business dispute was about to unravel. What would you do if your biggest betrayal walked back into your life, holding your fate in her hands? Have you ever made a decision you thought was right, only to discover you were completely wrong? Have you ever been manipulated into destroying something precious? Picture this happening to you in the most public way possible. This is about a man who traded love for lies, and a woman who came back to collect the debt. Cole Harrington built his empire on other people's destruction, but he never thought the destruction would come home to roost. Behind the scenes, something darker was lurking, a tapestry of deception woven by someone he trusted completely. But what happens when the victim becomes the judge? What happens when 3 years of buried guilt meets 3 years of calculated revenge? And what happens when an innocent child becomes the center of a war between adults who forgot how to love without hurting? If you've ever wondered whether people can truly change, or if some betrayals are unforgivable, this story will shake you to your core. Follow along as we uncover a mystery that's been buried for 3 years, where every answer leads to a darker question, and where the price of redemption might be everything Cole has left to lose. Now, let me take you back to where this sinister tapestry began to unravel, back to the man who thought he could outrun his past by building walls of money and power around his heart. Picture this: 3 years after destroying his marriage with the cruelest betrayal imaginable, Cole Harrington thought he'd buried the past beneath his billion-dollar empire. But some ghosts don't stay buried. They just wait for the perfect moment to rise. The 42nd floor of the Harrington Tower gleamed like a monument to ambition. The ambient lighting of his penthouse office overlooked a picturesque Houston skyline, where glass and steel reached toward heaven while hiding the sins that built them. Cole stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection ghosted against the morning sky. A man who had everything except the one thing money couldn't buy: peace. His morning routine was clockwork precision. Black coffee, no sugar. Wall Street Journal, financial section first. Stock reports that showed his empire growing bigger every day, every hour, every minute. Numbers climbing like his guilt was sinking. The man who once laughed with his wife over pancakes now ate protein bars while calculating market projections. The mahogany desk that stretched between him and the rest of the world held everything that mattered now. Contracts worth millions, acquisition papers that would crush competitors, and a locked drawer he hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside that drawer, 3 photographs gathered dust. A wedding photo where 2 young people smiled like they believed in forever. A pregnancy announcement he'd torn in half, and divorce papers signed in anger and regret. His assistant knocked. "Mr. Harrington, your 9 o'clock is here." Cole straightened his tie. Italian silk that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Send them in. But as he prepared to demolish another business rival, his phone buzzed with a message that made his blood freeze. The past doesn't forget. Neither do I. He deleted it immediately, like he deleted dozens of similar messages over the years. Anonymous numbers. Bloqué contact. Someone out there knew his secrets, but Cole had built his empire on the bones of buried truths. One more skeleton in the closet wouldn't kill him, or so it seemed. The meeting dragged on. Another company begging to avoid bankruptcy. Another family business that would be crushed under his corporate machine. Cole listened with the attention of a predator, calculating not just profits, but the human cost he'd learned to ignore. Every signature was someone else's dream dying. Every acquisition was another family's legacy becoming his stepping stone. Please, Mr. Harrington, the elderly businessman across from him pleaded. This company has been in my family for 4 generations. Cole's pen hovered over the contract. For just a moment, he heard another voice, softer, warmer, from a time when he still believed in mercy. Danielle's voice, the night she'd told him about the baby. You're going to be such a good father, Cole. You have so much love to give. He signed the papers anyway. The man left defeated, and Cole returned to his window. The city spread below him like a kingdom he'd conquered, but victory felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. His reflection stared back, successful, powerful, untouchable, and completely alone. The locked drawer seemed to call to him, but he resisted. Those photos were from another life, when he was another man. Before the DNA test that shattered everything. Before the betrayal that turned love into poison. Before he learned that trust was just another word for weakness. His phone rang. Unknown number. Cole Harrington. Silence. Then a child's laughter in the background before the line went dead. His hands trembled, actually trembled for the first time in years. Children's laughter had haunted his dreams since the divorce. The child he'd never meet, never hold, never teach to throw a baseball or ride a bike. The child that wasn't his, according to the test. The child Danielle had used to trap him, according to Marcus. But what if? No. He'd seen the results. Marcus had shown him the lab reports, the private investigator's photos, the evidence that his wife had betrayed him first. Cole had made the only logical choice. Cut his losses and rebuild. That's what successful men do. They adapt. They survive. They don't look back. As his assistant handed him the court summons that would change everything, Cole's hands trembled for the first time in years. The case name read, Pierce versus Harrington Industries. That name shouldn't have meant anything to him anymore. Pierce was Danielle's maiden name, but she was gone, moved away, started over. Unless the papers slipped from his fingers, scattered across his Persian rug like autumn leaves. Something darker was lurking behind this lawsuit, something that would unravel the tapestry of lies he'd woven around his heart. The empire he'd built as armor against his guilt was about to become his battlefield. What would you do if success came at the cost of your soul? Tell me in the comments if you think wealth can fill the void left by love. Have you ever made a choice that seemed right at the time, but haunted you forever? Cole Harrington was about to discover that some prices are too high to pay, and some debts can't be settled with money. The past was coming to collect, and it had been planning this moment for 3 long years. The war was about to begin, and Cole didn't even know he was already losing. Veteran officers of justice had seen everything, but what happened next would thrill even the most seasoned legal minds. The Harris County Courthouse had witnessed murder trials, corporate scandals, and family feuds that destroyed dynasties. But none had prepared the gallery for the moment Cole Harrington walked through those heavy wooden doors. The courthouse buzzed with energy that morning. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing like lightning strikes, all waiting to see Houston's most ruthless billionaire face another lawsuit. They expected the usual show, expensive lawyers, sealed settlements, and Cole walking away richer while someone else bled dry. They had no idea they were about to witness something far more sinister. Cole's entourage moved like a small army. 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than cars, 2 assistants with tablets and briefcases, and a security detail that cleared paths through the crowd. He wore confidence like armor, his jaw set in the same expression that had intimidated boardrooms across Texas. The courtroom's fluorescent lights cast long shadows as spectators filled every seat. Something was brewing in the air, that electric tension that comes before storms break. Cole took his place at the defendant's table, surveying his domain like a king in his castle. But kingdoms fall when the right person knows where to strike. The plaintiff's door opened, and time stopped. She walked in like justice personified, tall, confident, with dark skin that seemed to glow under the harsh lights. Her black suit was simple but perfectly tailored, her hair pulled back in a way that meant business. But it was her face that made Cole's world spiral out of control. Every feature was Danielle's. The curve of her cheekbones, the arch of her eyebrows, even the way she held her chin when she was determined. It was impossible. Danielle was gone. He'd made sure of that. As investigators would later piece together, this wasn't coincidence. This was orchestrated. All rise for the Honorable Judge Martinez, the bailiff announced. But Cole couldn't rise, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was seeing. The woman at the plaintiff's table turned and looked directly at him, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "I am Naomi Pierce. I'll be representing the plaintiff in this case." Pierce, Danielle's sister, the sister who'd been in law school when everything fell apart, who'd sworn at the divorce proceedings that Cole would pay for what he'd done. The sister who'd disappeared with Danielle after the settlement. Judge Martinez settled into his chair. "Ms. Pierce, you may begin your opening statement." Naomi stood with the grace of someone who'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. She walked to the center of the courtroom, and Cole could feel every eye in the room watching, waiting. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and strong. 3 years ago, my client was wronged by the defendant in the most devastating way possible. Not just financially, though will prove significant damages, but personally, emotionally, and morally. Cole's lawyers started to object, but Naomi held up her hand. "You see, Mr. Harrington has built his empire on a foundation of lies. He's destroyed families, crushed dreams, and walked away richer while leaving broken hearts in his wake. But today, the chickens come home to roost." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear hearts beating. "Mr. Harrington," Naomi continued, turning to face him directly, "you owe more than money. You owe the truth about the child you never knew existed." The gasps echoed off the walls like gunshots. Cole felt the blood drain from his face as every camera in the room turned toward him. Reporters scribbled frantically. His lawyers looked confused, panicked. But Naomi wasn't finished. 3 years ago, you abandoned your pregnant wife based on false information. You divorced her, cut off all support, and left her to raise your son alone. Your son, Mr. Harrington, the DNA test you relied on, it was fabricated. The evidence you believed, it was planted. The betrayal you thought you discovered, it never happened. Cole's chair felt like it was falling through the floor. The child, the DNA test, Marcus had shown in the results, had walked him through the evidence step by step. It was impossible that. Objection! His lead attorney finally found his voice. "These are serious allegations without foundation." "Oh, I have foundation," Naomi smiled, producing a thick folder. DNA results from 3 different labs. Hospital records, birth certificates, and video testimony from the child himself. She pressed play on a tablet, and suddenly the courtroom filled with a voice that made Cole's heart stop beating. "Hi, my name is Daniel Cole Pierce, and I'm 8 years old. My mama told me stories about my daddy before she went to heaven. She said he was a good man who got confused by bad people." The boy's face filled the screen. Cole's eyes, Cole's nose, Cole's stubborn chin. There was no denying it. This child was his son. "Mama said someday he'd want to meet me, and I should tell him I'm not mad. I just want to know why he never came to see me." The video stopped, and the silence in the courtroom was deafening. What would you do if you discovered you'd been living a lie for 3 years? How would you handle finding out you had abandoned your own child based on false information? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Naomi calmly stared Cole down and delivered her final blow. "Mr. Harrington, meet your son." The son you threw away. The son who's been asking about his daddy since he could talk. The son whose mother died 6 months ago, still believing you might come back. Cole's world didn't just spiral, it shattered completely. And this was only the beginning. Imagine this. For 3 years, someone has been watching, waiting, and building a case that would unravel everything you thought you knew about yourself. Naomi Pierce had turned grief into a weapon, and Cole Harrington was about to discover just how sharp revenge could be when it was sharpened by love. The courtroom adjourned for lunch, but the real drama was just beginning. Cole stumbled out of the courthouse like a man walking through a nightmare, his entourage struggling to keep up with questions they couldn't answer. Reporters shouted from every direction. "Mr. Harrington, did you know about your son? How do you respond to allegations of abandonment? Will you seek custody now?" But Cole heard none of it. His mind was trapped in that video, replaying his son's voice over and over. Daniel Cole Pierce. The boy had his name, his face, his eyes that held questions Cole wasn't sure he could ever answer. Meanwhile, Naomi Pierce sat in her rental car across the street, watching the chaos she'd orchestrated. Her phone buzzed with messages from reporters wanting interviews, lawyers offering to represent her, and activists praising her for taking down Houston's most ruthless businessman. But she ignored them all. There was only one message that mattered, from a number she'd memorized but never called. Phase 1 complete. Time for Phase 2. Your silent partner. 3 years ago, when Danielle collapsed in that Chicago apartment, barely alive from complications during childbirth, she'd made Naomi promise 2 things. Take care of Daniel, and make sure Cole knew the truth. The first promise had been easy. Naomi loved that boy like her own son. The second promise had required becoming someone she'd never planned to be. Law school had always been Naomi's dream, but after Danielle's divorce, it became her mission. Every late night studying, every exam, every internship was preparation for this moment. She'd graduated top of her class, passed the bar on the first try, and spent 2 years building a reputation as the lawyer you called when you needed justice, not just legal victory. But taking down Cole Harrington required more than legal skill. It required resources she didn't have and connections she couldn't make on her own. That's when the anonymous messages had started. "I can help you destroy Cole Harrington." At first, she'd ignored them. Then Danielle had gotten sicker. The medical bills had piled up, and desperation had made her listen. Her mysterious benefactor knew things about Cole that weren't public record. About his business deals, his personal life, his weaknesses. They knew about Marcus Webb's manipulation, about the false DNA test, about the web of lies that had destroyed her sister's marriage. "Why do you want to help me?" she'd asked during their first phone call. "Because Cole Harrington destroyed someone I love too, and because some debts can only be paid in public humiliation." The voice was disguised, electronic, untraceable. But the information was real, and it was devastating. Bank records showing payments to fake DNA labs. Email chains revealing Marcus Webb's plan to break up Cole's marriage. Even surveillance footage of Marcus planting evidence in Danielle's apartment. Naomi had spent months verifying every piece of evidence, building an airtight case that would not just win in court, but destroy Cole's reputation completely. She'd learned his schedule, his habits, his weaknesses. She'd studied him like a hunter studies prey. But something had changed during those months of preparation. The more she learned about what had really happened, the more she realized Cole was as much a victim as Danielle had been. Marcus Webb had played them all, turning love into suspicion, trust into betrayal. That didn't excuse what Cole had done. Didn't forgive how easily he'd believed the worst about the woman who'd loved him. Didn't erase the pain Danielle had suffered or the years Daniel had spent asking about a father who never came. But it complicated things. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but she recognized the electronic distortion immediately. "How did it go?" the voice asked. "Better than expected." He's shaken. "The media is eating it alive. His stock price dropped 15% in the last hour." "Good. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. I'll send you the files tonight." "Wait," Naomi said. "I need to know who you are. This has gone beyond business. That little boy in there is my nephew, and whatever comes next, I need to know you're not going to hurt him." Silence stretched across the connection. You'll know everything when the time is right. For now, just remember, Cole Harrington isn't the real enemy. He's just the most visible target. The line went dead, leaving Naomi staring at her phone with more questions than answers. Who had the power to orchestrate something this complex? Who had access to information that should have been impossible to obtain? And what did they ultimately want? Across the street, Cole's limousine pulled away from the courthouse, but Naomi could see his silhouette in the back window. He looked broken, defeated. Nothing like the arrogant businessman who'd walked into that courtroom expecting another easy victory. For just a moment, she felt something that surprised her, pity. Then she remembered Daniel's video testimony, remembered her sister's final words, and her resolve hardened. Justice isn't just about law, Mr. Harrington. Sometimes it's about making sure the truth can't hide anymore. Would you spend years planning to get justice for a loved one? How far would you go to protect your family? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Naomi's position. As Naomi walked out of the courthouse, her phone buzzed with a message from her secret client. Phase 1 complete. Now show him what real betrayal looks like. The game was just beginning, and Cole had no idea how many players were on the board. The most successful betrayals aren't the ones you see coming. They're the ones orchestrated by people you trust. And Marcus Webb had been planning Cole Harrington's destruction from the very beginning, wrapping manipulation in the disguise of friendship. Cole sat in his penthouse that night, staring at the divorce papers he'd pulled from his locked drawer. 3 years ago, signing them had felt like survival. Now they felt like a confession of his own stupidity. How had he been so blind? The memory came flooding back with painful clarity. Atlanta, Georgia, 3 years earlier. The pregnancy announcement had been perfect. Danielle had planned it like a movie scene. Candles on their anniversary, his favorite dinner, and a tiny pair of baby shoes sitting next to his plate. Cole had cried actual tears of joy, something he'd never admitted to anyone. "We're having a baby," Danielle had whispered, her dark eyes shining with hope and fear and pure love. "We're having a baby," Cole had repeated, the words feeling like magic in his mouth. That night, they talked until sunrise about names and nurseries and the future they'd build together. Cole had already started planning college funds, trust accounts, family vacations. He'd wanted to give his child everything he never had growing up poor in East Texas. The picturesque Atlanta wedding venue should have been the beginning of forever. Danielle looked like an angel in her dress, and Cole felt like the luckiest man alive. Even their families, who'd had doubts about the interracial marriage, seemed caught up in the joy of the moment. But veteran observers of human nature might have noticed the subtle signs of manipulation already brewing in the background. Marcus Webb had been Cole's best man, the college roommate who'd helped him build his first business, the brother he'd never had by blood. Marcus had given the perfect toast, talking about love conquering all obstacles, about Cole finally finding someone worthy of his heart. What Cole hadn't known was that Marcus had been planning his destruction since the engagement announcement. The business partnership that had made them both rich required specific clauses about personal stability. If either partner went through a messy divorce or public scandal, the other could buy them out at a fraction of the company's value. Marcus had insisted on those clauses, calling them protection against gold diggers and publicity nightmares. "You never know what people will do for money," Marcus had said. "Better to be safe." Cole had signed without question. He trusted Marcus completely. The first crack in paradise came 6 months into the pregnancy. Marcus started dropping subtle hints. Had Cole noticed how much time Danielle spent at the law library? Had he seen her talking to that classmate, the one who seemed awfully interested in her personal life? "I'm probably wrong," Marcus would say with just the right amount of concern. "But you know how law school can change people. All that talk about independence and women's rights." Cole had dismissed it at first. Danielle was ambitious, driven. Those were things he loved about her. But Marcus was persistent, planting seeds of doubt with the skill of a master gardener. Then came the fake private investigator report. "I hate to show you this," Marcus had said, his face full of false sympathy. "But you need to know, the photos looked damning. Danielle having lunch with her study partner, walking with him to her car, hugging him goodbye. Innocent moments twisted into evidence of betrayal through careful timing and strategic angles. It gets worse. Marcus had continued, producing bank statements that showed deposits to Danielle's account. Someone's been paying her bills. Someone who isn't you. The statements were real. Marcus had made sure of that. What Cole didn't know was that Marcus himself had been making those deposits, using shell companies to hide the paper trail. Every piece of evidence had been carefully constructed to tell the story Marcus wanted Cole to believe. But the final blow was the DNA test. "I know this is hard," Marcus had said, handing Cole the lab results. "But you need to know the truth before the baby comes." The test showed 0 probability of paternity. Cole wasn't the father. Standing in his office that night, Cole could still remember the moment his world had shattered. The betrayal had felt like a physical wound, like someone had reached into his chest and torn out his heart. He'd confronted Danielle the next morning, showing her the evidence, demanding answers she couldn't give. "Cole, please," she'd begged, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how this happened. The test has to be wrong. You know I would never." But Cole had been too hurt, too angry, too thoroughly manipulated to listen. He'd filed for divorce that same day, cut off all financial support, and moved back to Houston. He'd thrown himself into work, using business success as armor against the pain. Marcus had been there through it all, offering support and understanding. He'd helped Cole restructure their partnership, taking advantage of the personal stability clauses to increase his own share of the company. He'd encouraged Cole to date other women, to move on, to forget. "She was never worthy of you anyway," Marcus had said. "You deserve better." What Cole didn't realize was that Marcus had been playing a longer game. Every business deal, every acquisition, every strategic move had been designed to position Marcus as the true power behind their empire. Cole had been the face, the reputation, the public figure. But Marcus had been pulling the strings all along. Something darker was lurking in their perfect partnership, and Cole had been too blinded by grief to see it. The manipulation had been flawless. Until now. Have you ever been manipulated by someone you trusted completely? Share how you discovered the truth in the comments below. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Want to know who really ordered that DNA test? Meet me tomorrow. Parking garage, level B3 noon. Come alone." The war was about to get personal. Picture a mother's love so fierce that she builds an entire new life to protect a child from a father who chose lies over family. Danielle Pierce had transformed heartbreak into strength, but the cost had been higher than anyone knew. Chicago winters were brutal, but Danielle had learned to find warmth in unexpected places. The small apartment she'd found in Pilsen wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, and a radiator that clanged like a ghost in chains. But it had something their Atlanta mansion never had. Safety from the man who'd broken her heart. She'd named the baby Daniel Cole Pierce, carrying his father's name like a secret hope she couldn't quite abandon. Even after everything, even after the divorce papers and the cruel words and the way Cole had looked at her like she was a stranger, she believed someday he would realize the truth. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy like the other kids?" The question had started when Daniel turned 4, innocent and devastating. Danielle would kneel down to his level, looking into eyes that were undeniably Cole's, and try to find words that wouldn't poison a child's heart. "Your daddy lives far away, baby. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you." It was a lie wrapped in hope, delivered with the skill of a mother who refused to let her son carry her pain. The ambient struggles of single motherhood had worn her down slowly, like water wearing away stone. Law school became night school, became weekend classes, became studying while Daniel slept. The legal career she dreamed of became paralegal work, then legal secretary, then whatever paid enough to keep them fed and housed. Daniel was brilliant, too brilliant sometimes. He asked questions that cut straight to the heart of things adults try to hide. Why did other kids' daddies come to school plays? Why didn't they have any pictures of her wedding? Why did Mama cry sometimes when she thought he was asleep? "I look like him, don't I?" Daniel had asked on his 7th birthday, staring at himself in the mirror. "That's why you get sad sometimes when you look at me." Danielle had wrapped her arms around her son, breathing in the scent of his hair, trying to memorize the moment before it passed. You look like the best parts of both of us, baby, and you make me proud every single day. The tapestry of sacrifice was woven daily in small moments. Choosing between groceries and gas money, working double shifts while Daniel stayed with neighbors, wearing the same 3 outfits rotated through the week while making sure Daniel always had clean clothes for school. But she never let him see her break. Never let him know that some nights she cried herself to sleep wondering what would happen to him if she couldn't keep going. Never told him that the child support checks had stopped coming the day Cole signed those divorce papers. Naomi visited when she could, bringing gifts and stories and promises that things would get better. Daniel adored his aunt, and she adored him back with a fierceness that sometimes scared Danielle. There was something dangerous in the way Naomi's eyes hardened whenever Cole's name was mentioned. "You should fight for what he owes you," Naomi would say during their late-night phone calls. "He can't just walk away like you and Daniel don't exist." "I don't want his money," Danielle would reply. "I just want my son to have a father who chooses to love him." But as Daniel got older, the questions got harder. Why couldn't they take vacations like his friends? Why did Mama work so many jobs? Why did she get that scared look in her eyes whenever someone knocked on the door unexpectedly? The truth was that Danielle lived in constant fear, not of violence, but of discovery. She'd heard about Cole's business success, seen his face on magazine covers and news programs. Part of her was proud of the man she'd loved. Part of her was terrified he might somehow find him and try to take Daniel away. "What if he doesn't want me?" Daniel had asked on his 8th birthday, the question coming out of nowhere while they shared a grocery store cake in their tiny kitchen. "Oh, baby," Danielle had whispered, pulling him close. "If your daddy really knew you, he would want nothing more than to be part of your life. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes they don't know how to fix." That was the night she'd started getting sick. At first, it seemed like exhaustion. Working 3 jobs while raising a brilliant, energetic boy would wear down anyone. But the headaches got worse, and the dizziness became constant, and the doctors' faces got more serious with every test. "How long do I have?" she'd asked Dr. Martinez after the final diagnosis. "With treatment, maybe 2 years. Without it," he'd shrugged apologetically. Treatment meant hospitals and insurance battles and medical bills that would destroy any chance Daniel had for a normal childhood. It meant using up every penny of the college fund she'd scraped together for him. Danielle had made her choice. "I want to go home," she told Naomi. "I want to spend whatever time I've left making sure Daniel knows how much he's loved." The final months had been a race against time and pain. Danielle wrote letters for every milestone Daniel would reach without her. His graduation, his first heartbreak, his wedding day. She recorded videos of bedtime stories and birthday songs and all the "I love you" messages a mother's heart could hold. When Daniel collapsed at his school play, her final words to Naomi were, "Promise me he'll know the truth. Promise me Cole will pay for what he took from us." What would you tell a child about a parent who abandoned them? How do you explain the inexplicable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The boy who'd asked innocent questions about his daddy was about to become the center of a war between adults who'd forgotten how to love without hurting. And somewhere in Houston, Cole Harrington was about to discover that some debts compound interest, and his was about to come due. As investigators pieced together the evidence, a sinister pattern emerged. Cole's betrayal was just the beginning of a much larger conspiracy. Marcus Webb hadn't just destroyed one marriage. He'd been systematically dismantling lives for years, and Cole was about to discover he wasn't the puppet master. He was just another puppet. The parking garage at B3 level felt like descending into hell. Concrete walls closed in like a tomb, and the fluorescent lights flickered with the rhythm of a dying heartbeat. Cole's footsteps echoed in the emptiness as he walked toward the figure waiting by the far wall. "You came," the woman said, stepping out of shadows that seemed to cling to her like smoke. Cole recognized her immediately, Rebecca Santos, Marcus's former assistant. She'd quit 6 months ago after working for their company for nearly 5 years. Her resignation had been sudden, professional, and completely unexpected. "What do you want, Rebecca?" She held up a flash drive, her hand trembling slightly. "The truth about Marcus Webb. The truth about what he did to your marriage." The truth about what he's been doing to other people. Cole's throat went dry. What are you talking about? Marcus didn't just fake your DNA test, Cole. That was practice. He's been running the same game on other executives across Texas for 3 years. Rich men with beautiful wives, successful partnerships that needed to be restructured. She plugged the drive in her laptop, and the screen filled with files that made Cole's blood run cold. Bank records showing payments to fake DNA labs. Email chains coordinating false evidence. Photos of private investigators following innocent women, waiting for moments that could be twisted into betrayal. Thomas Mitchell in Dallas, Rebecca said, clicking through folders. Convinced his wife was cheating, divorced her while she was battling cancer. Marcus bought out his share of their oil company for 30 cents on the dollar. Click. Another folder. James Rodriguez in San Antonio. 3 kids, 20-year marriage. Marcus planted gambling debts in his wife's name, then showed James the evidence. Divorce was finalized last month. Marcus acquired 60% of their restaurant chain. Cole felt sick. How many? 12 that I know of. Maybe more. Rebecca's voice cracked. I help him do it, Cole. I scheduled the private investigators. I coordinated with the fake labs. I thought it was just business research. The corporate offices had looked picturesque from the outside, but veteran officers would recognize the signs. This was where power corrupted absolutely. Marcus had built an empire on the bones of destroyed families, and Cole had been his unwitting frontman. Why are you telling me this now? Rebecca wiped her eyes, smearing mascara like war paint. Because he's not done. Your divorce was just his biggest win so far, but he's planning something that will make everything else look small. She pulled up another file, this one marked Project Harrington Phase 2. He's been buying up your personal debts, old business loans, even a mortgage on your childhood home. He owns pieces of your life you don't even know about. And when the Pierce lawsuit destroys your reputation, he'll call in everything at once. Cole's legs felt weak. He can't do that. We're partners. Read the fine print of your partnership agreement. The moral turpitude clause, the personal conduct standards, the media liability section. He wrote them specifically to give himself an out when your reputation collapsed. The documents on screen were damning. Every contract Cole had signed over the past 5 years had been carefully crafted to transfer power to Marcus in case of public scandal. Cole had been signing his own corporate death warrant, one contract at a time. But why? We built this company together. We were friends. Rebecca laughed bitterly. Friends don't destroy each other's lives for profit, Cole. Marcus has been planning this since college. He's been waiting for you to fall in love, to get married, to give him something valuable to destroy. Something darker was lurking in Marcus's desperation. This wasn't just business. It was personal, twisted, sick. The eerie similarity between all his victims wasn't coincidence. They were all successful men who'd found love with women Marcus couldn't control. He hates seeing other people happy, Rebecca continued. Especially you. He's been in love with your success, your charm, your ability to make people trust you. But he's also been poisoned by jealousy since the day you met. Cole thought back to college, to all the times Marcus had sabotaged his relationships with subtle comments or convenient emergencies. He'd chalked it up to bad timing or protective friendship. Now he saw it for what it was, systematic emotional terrorism. There's something else, Rebecca said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The anonymous client funding Naomi Pierce's lawsuit? The one providing all the evidence against you. Cole's heart stopped. Marcus. He's been playing both sides from the beginning, destroying your marriage, then funding the lawsuit that would destroy your business. He gets to watch you lose everything twice, once in private, once in public. The tapestry of deception was more sinister than Cole had imagined. Marcus hadn't just betrayed him. He'd orchestrated a 3-year campaign of psychological warfare designed to strip away everything Cole valued most. Why didn't you come forward before? Rebecca's hands shook as she closed the laptop. Because I was scared. Because Marcus has dirt on everyone who works for him. Because I needed time to get copies of everything before I disappeared. She handed him the flash drive. This contains enough evidence to destroy him legally and financially. But Cole, he knows I'm here. He knows about this meeting. You need to move fast. As if summoned by her words, the parking garage suddenly filled with the sound of multiple car engines. Headlights blazed from both ends of the level, trapping them in a circle of light and shadow. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was playing a long game against you? How did you handle the betrayal when you realized the scope of their deception? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Actually, Rebecca said as officers cut her free, I've been wearing a wire for the past 6 months. The FBI has been investigating you for fraud, conspiracy, and now kidnapping. The tapestry of Marcus's conspiracy was finally unraveling, thread by thread. Every conversation, every threat, every admission had been recorded by the woman he'd thought was his victim. Cole watched as his former friend was handcuffed and read his rights, feeling something he hadn't experienced in 3 years: actual justice. How long have you known? He asked Rebecca as paramedics checked her injuries. Since the day I quit. I discovered what he was doing to other families, and I knew I had to stop him. The FBI approached me because they needed inside evidence. Naomi stood beside Cole, both of them watching Marcus being loaded into a police car. So what now? Cole asked. Now you meet your son, Naomi said simply. The lawsuit was never about money, Cole. It was about making sure Daniel had a father worthy of him. Tonight proved you are. Can two people who hurt each other find common ground when they're fighting for the same thing? Share a time when an enemy became an unexpected ally in the comments. As the warehouse emptied and justice finally prevailed, Cole realized his war was ending. But his most important battle, earning his son's love and trust, was just beginning. The drive back to the city felt like emerging from a nightmare into dawn. The fight for a child's future became a battle for redemption, forgiveness, and the chance to rewrite a story that began with betrayal. But Marcus Webb's final move from his jail cell would prove that some men prefer to destroy everything rather than admit defeat. The emergency custody hearing was called for the next morning. Word had spread through Houston's legal community like wildfire. The billionaire who discovered he had a son, the business partner arrested for conspiracy, and the sister who'd orchestrated the most dramatic courtroom reveal in Texas history. Cole sat in the family courthouse waiting area, his hands shaking with something between terror and hope. This wasn't about billion-dollar deals or corporate acquisitions. This was about earning the right to be called daddy by a little boy who'd been saving up hugs for 8 years. Naomi sat beside him, no longer his opponent, but his unlikely ally. The transformation was still hard to believe. Yesterday, they'd been enemies in a courtroom. Today, they were partners planning Daniel's future. He's scared, she said, showing Cole a text from Daniel's guardian in Chicago. He doesn't understand why all the grown-ups are fighting about him. He thinks he did something wrong. Cole's heart clenched. How do I explain this to him? How do I tell an 8-year-old that his father was too stupid to see through lies? You don't explain. You just show up. Kids don't need perfect parents, Cole. They need present ones. The family court's ambient lighting couldn't soften the harsh reality. They were about to decide the fate of one innocent child whose only crime was being born into adult chaos. Judge Patricia Hendricks entered, and the room fell silent. She was known for putting children's welfare above everything else, including adult egos and legal technicalities. This is an unusual case, she began, reviewing the files. We have a father who recently discovered he has a son, an aunt seeking custody, and a convicted criminal who somehow filed emergency motions from jail. Cole's blood ran cold. Marcus filed motions? Mr. Webb has claimed that Mr. Harrington is emotionally unstable and financially unreliable due to recent criminal associations. He's requesting that Daniel be placed in state custody pending a full investigation. Even for behind bars, Marcus was still trying to destroy Cole's life. But this time, he was using an innocent child as his weapon. Your Honor, Naomi stood, her voice steady despite the bombshell. Mr. Webb is hardly a reliable source, given that he's currently facing federal charges for fraud, conspiracy, and kidnapping. Nevertheless, his concerns must be addressed. Mr. Harrington, you've had quite a dramatic few days. Restaurant altercations, warehouse confrontations, revelations about your business partner. Are you prepared to provide a stable environment for a child? Cole stood slowly, feeling the weight of 8 lost years pressing down on him. Your Honor, 3 days ago, I thought I was a man who'd been betrayed by the woman I loved. Today I know I'm a father who was manipulated into abandoning his son. I can't change the past, but I can promise that boy will never doubt his father's love again. The palpable emotion in the courtroom was overwhelming. Even court reporters were wiping their eyes. I have a son who brushes his teeth without being asked, who helps elderly people carry groceries, who forgives easily because his mother taught him that heavy hearts can't fly. If that's not stability, then I don't know what is. Judge Hendricks consulted her notes. The court has received character references on your behalf. Dr. Patricia Williams speaks of your composure under pressure. Detective Maria Rodriguez praises your cooperation in the Webb investigation. Even Ms. Pierce here has filed a statement supporting your custody petition. Cole turned to look at Naomi, surprise and gratitude written across his face. She wrote that despite your past mistakes, you've shown the courage to face truth and fight for justice. She believes Daniel needs a father who's learned from his errors, not one who never made any. As investigators had pieced together Marcus's conspiracy, a clearer picture had emerged. Cole wasn't a villain. He was another victim who'd found the strength to stop running and start fighting back. However, the judge continued, this court's primary concern is Daniel's welfare. We'll be conducting a video conference with the child to hear his wishes directly. The screen flickered to life, revealing Daniel in the same Chicago conference room. But this time, he looked different, older somehow, more serious. The media attention had reached him, and someone had clearly explained what was happening. Hello, Daniel. Do you understand why we're talking today? The boy nodded gravely. The grown-ups are deciding where I should live, and my daddy wants to meet me now. How do you feel about that? Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his small face scrunched in concentration. Aunt Naomi says he didn't know I existed because bad people lied to him. Is that true? Judge Hendricks looked at Cole, who leaned toward the microphone. It's true, Daniel. I made a terrible mistake believing those lies, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The boy studied his father through the screen with those serious eyes that belonged on someone much older. Do you want to be my daddy now? Like, for real? Not just because the judge says you have to. Cole's voice broke as he answered. I want to be your daddy more than anything in the world. I want to teach you to throw a baseball and help with homework and read you bedtime stories. I want to make up for every hug I missed. Daniel's face broke into that gap-toothed grin that could light up the darkest room. Okay, but I have some rules. The entire courtroom chuckled despite the tension. What are your rules? You have to promise to never leave again, even if people tell lies about me. And you have to learn my favorite bedtime story so you can read it right. And his voice got smaller. You have to promise you'll love me even when I mess up. What makes someone worthy of being called a parent? Is it biology, presence, or something deeper? Share your thoughts in the comments. When the judge asked Daniel who he wanted to live with, the 8-year-old's answer shocked everyone in the courtroom. I want to live with my daddy, but I want Aunt Naomi to live close by so she can still help take care of me. Families are supposed to stick together, right? The gavel fell, but the real journey was just beginning. Cole had won the legal right to be Daniel's father. Now he had to earn the privilege of being his dad. Sometimes the clearest vision comes from the youngest eyes, and Daniel Cole Pierce was about to teach everyone in that Chicago airport what family really means. His first meeting with his father would prove that love isn't just about blood. It's about choice, forgiveness, and the courage to start over. The flight from Houston to Chicago felt longer than any business trip Cole had ever taken. He'd flown this route dozens of times for corporate deals, but never with his hands shaking and his heart threatening to beat right out his chest. Naomi sat beside him, reviewing Daniel's school records and medical files. The practical details of a life Cole had missed entirely. Report cards showing straight A's, doctor visits for routine checkups, art projects and homework assignments that painted the picture of a normal, happy childhood built by a mother's determination and an aunt's devotion. He's shy at first, Naomi warned as they began their descent into O'Hare. But once he warms up, he talks nonstop. He's going to have a million questions about Texas and your work and whether you like the same foods he does. Cole stared out the window at the city where his son had grown up. The place Danielle had built a new life while he'd been drowning in guilt and lies 1,000 miles away. What if he changes his mind? What if he sees me and decides he doesn't want a daddy after all? Then you prove to him that he does. Kids don't need perfect parents, Cole. They need patient ones. The airport terminal buzzed with Friday evening travelers. But Cole only had eyes for the arrival gate where his son was waiting. As they walked through the corridor, he caught glimpses of himself in reflective surfaces. The expensive suit, the designer watch, all the armor he'd built around his heart over the past 3 years. None of it mattered now. Daniel stood next to his temporary guardian, a kind-faced woman from child services who'd been helping him process all the changes in his young life. The boy wore jeans and a Cubs jersey, and he was clutching a small backpack like it contained everything that mattered to him. When their eyes met across the terminal, time stopped. Daniel looked exactly like Cole had at that age. All knees and elbows and serious eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than any 8-year-old should carry. But there was something else in his face, something Cole recognized from looking in mirrors for 35 years. Stubborn hope refusing to be crushed by disappointment. The boy didn't run to him like in the movies. Instead, he walked slowly, studying Cole's face like he was memorizing it, comparing it to photographs and dreams and stories his mother had told him. They stopped 3 feet apart, father and son, strangers in blood, 8 years of separation hanging between them like a bridge neither was sure how to cross. "Hi," Daniel said finally, his voice smaller than it had sounded in the courtroom videos. "Hi," Cole managed, kneeling down to meet his son at eye level. "You're taller than I thought you'd be. Mama said I'm going to be tall like you. She said you were the tallest boy in your high school class." The casual mention of Danielle hit Cole like a physical blow. This child knew stories about him, details about his life that he'd forgotten himself. Danielle had kept Cole alive in their son's imagination even after he destroyed their family. "Your mama was right about a lot of things," Cole said carefully. "She was the smartest person I ever knew." Daniel nodded solemnly. "She was smart about everything except being sick. She couldn't figure out how to get better." The simple honesty of it, the way children accept tragedy without the complicated emotions adults layer on top, took Cole's breath away. "I brought you something," Daniel said, opening his backpack. He pulled out the wedding photo Danielle had given him, now carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. "Mama said you might want this back." Cole's hands trembled as he took the photograph. 2 young people who believed in forever, laughing at some joke that had been forgotten in the wreckage of their marriage. They looked so hopeful, so sure that love was enough to conquer anything. She kept this. She said it reminded her that people can be happy even when they're not anymore. She said maybe someday we'd all be happy again, just different. The fluorescent lights of the airport terminal cast long shadows around them, but somehow the space felt warm, sacred even. Other travelers moved past like they were in a different world, and maybe they were. "Daniel, I need to tell you something important," Cole said, still kneeling so they were face to face. "I made a terrible mistake. I believed lies about your mama, and I walked away when I should have stayed and fought for our family." The boy listened with the intense focus of someone much older. "I can't change what I did, but I can promise you this. I will never walk away again. Not from you, not from us, not even if things get hard." Daniel studied his father's face for a long moment, then reached out and touched Cole's cheek where tears had started to fall. Grown-ups cry when they're sorry, but kids cry when they're happy. "What kind are you?" "Both," Cole whispered. That's when Daniel stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Cole's neck, finally bridging the gap between them. "I saved up hugs for 8 years, he whispered into Cole's ear. "Want to see how many I got?" Children often see through adult complications to the truth. What has a child taught you about forgiveness or unconditional love? Share your story in the comments. As Cole held his son for the first time, Daniel pulled back and asked the question that would define their future together. "Daddy, are we going to be okay now?" And for the first time in 3 years, Cole answered with complete certainty, "Yeah, buddy. We're going to be just fine." The truth has a way of surfacing when lives are on the line, and Marcus Webb's house of cards was finally collapsing. But justice isn't just about punishment. Sometimes it's about making sure the innocent are protected and the future is better than the past. 6 months after the warehouse confrontation, Houston's federal courthouse buzzed with the energy of a trial that had captivated the nation. The case against Marcus Webb had grown beyond simple fraud. It was now a sweeping indictment of corporate corruption, domestic terrorism, and the systematic destruction of American families for profit. Cole sat in the gallery, no longer the defendant, but a key witness in the prosecution of his former friend. Daniel sat beside him, missing a day of his new school in Houston to watch justice finally being served. The boy had insisted on coming, saying he needed to see the bad man who'd kept his family apart. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the federal prosecutor began. Over the next few days, you'll hear about a conspiracy so calculated, so cruel, that it reads like fiction. But I assure you, the 12 families destroyed by Marcus Webb's schemes were very real. The evidence was overwhelming. Rebecca Santos had provided the FBI with 5 years' worth of recordings, documents, and first-hand testimony about Marcus's systematic targeting of successful men with happy marriages. The pattern was always the same. Identify the target, exploit business relationships, plant evidence of spousal infidelity, provide false DNA tests, then swoop in to acquire the man's assets during the emotional and financial chaos of divorce. The defendant didn't just steal money, the prosecutor continued. He stole childhoods. He stole fathers from sons and daughters. He stole the fundamental right of families to exist without interference from predators who view human happiness as an opportunity for profit. As investigators had pieced together the full scope of Marcus's operation, they discovered a network that stretched across Texas and into 3 other states. Fake DNA labs, corrupt private investigators, shell companies designed to launder money and hide assets. It was a criminal enterprise disguised as business consulting. Cole took the witness stand on day 3 of the trial, facing the man who'd been his best friend for 20 years. Marcus sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his arrogance finally stripped away by federal custody and the weight of evidence against him. "Mr. Harrington," the prosecutor asked, "how long did you trust Marcus Webb with your personal and professional life?" 20 years, Cole answered, his voice steady. "Since college. I considered him my brother. And during those 20 years, did you have any indication that he was systematically manipulating and destroying your relationships?" Cole looked directly at Marcus, seeing him clearly for the first time. "I thought he was protective. I thought he was looking out for my interests. I didn't realize he was sabotaging every chance I had at happiness, so he could maintain control over my life and my business." The prosecutor presented the fake DNA test, the planted evidence in Danielle's apartment, the financial records showing Marcus's payments to corrupt investigators. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of a friendship that had been built on lies from the beginning. "Mr. Harrington, what was the impact on your family when you believed these fabricated lies?" Cole's voice broke slightly. "I abandoned my pregnant wife. I divorced the woman I loved based on false evidence. I spent 3 years believing I wasn't a father while my son grew up asking why his daddy didn't want him." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of jurors shifting in their seats, processing the human cost of Marcus's greed. "And how did you discover the truth?" "My son's aunt, Naomi Pierce, filed a lawsuit that forced me to confront what had really happened. The DNA test that destroyed my marriage was fake. The evidence of my wife's infidelity was planted. The man I trusted most had orchestrated the destruction of my family for financial gain. When it was the defense attorney's turn, he tried to paint Marcus as a successful businessman who'd simply made aggressive deals. But the recorded conversations destroyed that narrative. Hours of Marcus bragging about his manipulations, laughing about the families he destroyed, planning even more elaborate schemes. The most damning evidence came from Marcus's own words, recorded during a phone call with another target 6 months earlier. The key is making them believe it's their choice to walk away. You don't force the divorce. You just make staying married so painful that they choose to leave. then you're the supportive friend picking up the pieces while you pick up their assets. Rebecca Santos's testimony was devastating. She detailed 5 years of helping Marcus destroy marriages, from scheduling fake DNA tests to coordinating with corrupt private investigators to plant evidence. Her voice shook as she described realizing the human cost of what they were doing. "I kept telling myself it was just business," she said. "But when I saw Daniel Pierce asking his aunt why his daddy didn't love him, I knew I had to stop it. These weren't just deals. They were real families with real children being torn apart for money." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: federal fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, and domestic terrorism charges that would put Marcus behind bars for the next 30 years. As the verdicts were read, Marcus finally looked at Cole with something like regret in his eyes. But it was too late for apologies or explanations. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, only survived. Judge Harrison's sentence was harsh but fair. "Mr. Webb, you violated the most sacred trusts of friendship and family for profit. You turned love into a weapon and children into collateral damage. This court sentences you to 30 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Do you believe people can change after they've shown their true nature? Can someone who caused this much pain ever deserve forgiveness?" Share your thoughts in the comments. As they left the courthouse, Daniel looked up at his father and asked, "Is the bad man going to stay in jail forever?" "For a very long time, buddy. Long enough that he can't hurt any more families." Daniel nodded solemnly. "Good. Families should be safe." The boy was right. Families should be safe. And for the first time in years, Cole's family finally was. 1 year after Cole Harrington walked into that courtroom expecting routine legal victory, he stood on a very different stage, ready to transform his greatest failure into his most important success. The Daniel Pierce Foundation for Family Justice was about to open its doors, proving that sometimes the best way to heal from betrayal is to prevent it from happening to others. The Houston Convention Center buzzed with energy that had nothing to do with corporate profits or business deals. Families filled the audience. Fathers reunited with children, couples who'd survived manipulation attempts, survivors of domestic fraud schemes. The media was there too, but this time they weren't hunting for scandal. They were witnessing redemption. Cole stood backstage, adjusting his tie with hands that no longer shook with guilt or fear. The past year had changed him in ways that went deeper than the obvious. He learned to braid his daughter's hair. Wait, that was wrong. Daniel was his son, not daughter. The thought made him smile. He learned to help with third-grade math homework, to make pancakes that weren't completely burnt, and to answer the 1,000 daily questions that 8-year-olds ask about everything from dinosaurs to why the sky is blue. "You ready for this?" Naomi asked, joining him in the wings. She looked different too, softer somehow, like the sharp edges of anger had been smoothed away by the healing power of family coming together. As ready as anyone could be to talk about the worst mistakes of their life in front of 500 people, Cole replied. Through the curtain, he could see Daniel in the front row, wearing his best button-up shirt and sitting next to his new stepmother. No, that wasn't right either. Cole hadn't remarried. Daniel was sitting next to Mrs. Rodriguez, his third-grade teacher who'd become like family over the past year. The foundation had been Daniel's idea, in the way that only children can cut straight to the heart of complicated adult problems. "Daddy," he'd said one night during their bedtime story ritual, "if the bad man hurt other kids' families too, shouldn't we help fix them?" Out of the mouths of babes, Cole walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, but his eyes went straight to his son, who was clapping so hard Cole was afraid he might fall out of his chair. Ladies and gentlemen, families and friends, welcome to the opening ceremony of the Daniel Pierce Foundation for Family Justice. The name had been Cole's choice, honoring both his son and the woman who'd fought to bring their family back together. Danielle's maiden name would live on in the work they did to protect other families from the kind of manipulation that had nearly destroyed theirs. A year ago, I stood in a different courtroom as a defendant in a case that exposed the worst parts of who I'd become. I was a man so focused on building an empire that I forgot to protect the kingdom that mattered most: my family. The ambient emotion in the convention center was palpable. These weren't corporate executives or business partners. These were people who understood loss, betrayal, and the long road back to wholeness. My son, Daniel, whom many of you met through media coverage of our story, asked me a question that changed my perspective completely. He wanted to know why we couldn't help other families avoid what happened to us. And you know what? He was absolutely right. Cole clicked to the first slide of his presentation, a map of Texas showing red dots where family fraud had been documented over the past 5 years. Marcus Webb's operation destroyed 12 families that we know of. But he wasn't unique. Across this country, predators are using this same playbook: fake DNA tests, planted evidence, exploiting business relationships to break apart marriages for profit. The foundation had 3 main goals: providing free DNA testing through verified labs, offering legal support for families targeted by fraud schemes, and educating the public about manipulation tactics used by domestic predators. We've partnered with every major DNA testing company to create a verification system that can't be faked. We've trained lawyers across Texas to recognize the signs of family fraud. And we've created a hotline where people can report suspicious activity before it destroys their lives. But the foundation was about more than just prevention. It was about healing. The Pierce Center for Family Reunification will provide counseling, mediation, and support for families trying to rebuild after fraud-based separations. Because sometimes the damage can be repaired if people have the right help and the courage to try. As Cole spoke, he found himself looking at faces in the audience. Fathers who'd been reunited with children, couples who'd survived attempts to break them apart, kids who had their families back together. Each story was a victory against the forces that try to tear apart the most basic human bonds. This foundation exists because my 8-year-old son believes that families should be safe. He believes that children shouldn't have to grow up wondering why their parents don't love them. He believes that people make mistakes, but they can also make amends. The presentation concluded with a video message from Daniel himself, recorded that morning in their kitchen while he ate cereal and got ready for school. Daddy says you're here because you want to help families stay together. That's really cool. My mama used to say that families are like puzzles. All the pieces have to fit together to make the whole picture. Sometimes bad people try to hide pieces or break them, but good people can help find them and put them back together. The boy's gap-toothed grin filled the screen. Daddy and me, we're a family now. Aunt Naomi too. We figure out how to fit together even though it was hard. So if your family puzzle got broken, don't give up. The pieces are still there. You just got to find them. If someone told you that love wasn't about rescue but recognition, would you believe them? If they said redemption is possible but it requires action, not just words, would you understand? Share what second chances mean to you in the comments. As the ceremony ended and people began to leave, Cole felt a small hand slip into his. Daniel had made his way onto the stage, still wearing his proud smile. Did we do good, Daddy? We did great, buddy. Your mama would be proud. Daniel nodded seriously. I think she knows. And Naomi says people we love never really leave us. They just love us from further away. Standing there with his son, surrounded by families who'd found their way back to each other, Cole realized something profound. The foundation wasn't just about helping others. It was about building the future on a foundation of truth, love, and the unbreakable bond between people who choose to fight for each other. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still being written. Some endings are actually beginnings in disguise, and the Harrington family was about to discover that love isn't just about healing old wounds. It's about creating something beautiful enough to honor those who can't be there to see it. 2 years after that first devastating courtroom revelation, their story was coming full circle in the most perfect way possible. The cemetery in Atlanta was picturesque in the way only Southern graveyards can be. Ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss, weathered headstones telling stories of lives well lived, and morning sunlight filtering through branches like nature's own cathedral lighting. Cole knelt beside Danielle's grave, placing fresh flowers next to the ones Daniel had carefully chosen that morning. "Hi, Mama," Daniel said, his voice no longer carrying the uncertainty it had 2 years ago. "I brought Daddy to meet you finally. Well, I guess you already knew him, but this is the first time he's visited you since I've been with him." At 10 years old, Daniel had grown into his father's height and his mother's wisdom. The gap-toothed grin had been replaced by a more mature smile, but his eyes still held that same stubborn hope that refused to be crushed. Cole traced Danielle's name on the headstone. Danielle Pierce Harrington, beloved mother, daughter, sister. She'd never legally changed her name back after the divorce, as if holding on to some piece of hope that their family might be restored. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come here," Cole said quietly. "I was ashamed. I thought you'd be angry with me for abandoning you both." "Mama doesn't get angry anymore," Daniel said matter-of-factly. "Aunt Naomi says people in heaven are too happy to be mad about earth stuff." The ambient peace of the morning was broken only by birdsong and the distant sound of traffic from the city where Cole and Danielle had first fallen in love. So much had changed since then, but standing here with their son, Cole could feel the presence of what had been good between them. "I brought something to show her," Cole said, pulling out his phone. The screen displayed an email that had arrived that morning. The final piece of news that made this visit feel like destiny rather than coincidence. "Daniel, remember how we talked about the foundation maybe expanding to help kids who don't have families at all?" The boy nodded. Over the past year, Daniel had become the foundation's unofficial ambassador, speaking at events with the kind of natural charisma that made adults stop and really listen to what children had to say about family and forgiveness. The Pierce Foundation just got approved to open residential facilities in 5 states. Places where kids who've been separated from their families can stay, while lawyers and counselors work to bring them home safely. Daniel's eyes went wide. Like a place where kids can live while grown-ups fix their family puzzles? Exactly like that. They named it the Danielle Pierce Children's Center, ensuring that her legacy would live on in the work of reuniting families. The first facility would open in Houston, the second in Chicago, where Daniel had grown up, and 3 more in cities across the South where family fraud schemes had torn apart the most lives. "Mama would love that," Daniel said with certainty. She always said kids need safe places to land when grown-ups mess up. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from Naomi, who was now the foundation's executive director and had become family in every way that mattered. She was in Houston, coordinating with architects and child psychologists to design spaces that felt like homes rather than institutions. Uncle Naomi says the playground equipment arrived early. "Want to go help her figure out where everything goes?" Daniel's face lit up. "Can we put the swings where kids can see the sunrise?" Mama used to say mornings were for new beginnings. The drive back to Houston felt different than their trip out. The weight of unfinished business had been lifted, replaced by the excitement of work still to be done. Daniel chattered about playground designs and bedroom colors, already planning how to make the children's center feel welcoming to scared kids who needed to believe that families could be fixed. Back in Houston, the foundation's headquarters buzzed with activity. The original legal aid office had expanded into 3 floors of a downtown building, with counselors, lawyers, family advocates, and volunteers all working toward the same goal, making sure that what happened to the Harrington family never happened to another. Naomi met them in the lobby, her arms full of architectural plans, and her face glowing with the satisfaction of meaningful work. "How did it go?" she asked, giving Daniel a hug that lasted longer than usual. "Good," Daniel said. "Daddy told Mama about the new houses for kids. I think she's excited." "I think she is too," Naomi agreed, and Cole could see she meant it. The 3 of them rode the elevator to the top floor, where Cole's office overlooked the Houston skyline he'd once viewed as a conquered kingdom. Now it looked like something different. A community where families could thrive without fear of predators who viewed human happiness as weakness to exploit. His desk held photos that told the real story of success. Daniel's school pictures, family portraits from their first Christmas together, letters from children who'd been reunited with their parents through the foundation's work. The locked drawer that had once held wedding photos and divorce papers now contained crayon drawings Daniel had made of their family. Stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "Daddy," Daniel said, looking out at the city below. Do you think Mama knows how many kids we've helped? I think she knows everything, buddy. And I think she's proud of the man you're becoming. Daniel considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important questions. When I grow up, I want to keep doing this work, helping families find their missing pieces. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? Would you run from that gift, or would you build something lasting to honor it? Share what legacy means to you in the comments. As the sun set over Houston, Cole realized that redemption wasn't a destination. It was a daily choice to turn pain into purpose, mistakes into meaning, and broken pieces into something beautiful enough to help others heal. Their story had come full circle, but the most important chapters were still being written in the lives of families who would never face the darkness alone. The foundation would live on. Daniel's wisdom would touch countless lives. And somewhere, Cole believed Danielle was smiling at the family they'd finally learned how to be. If this story of redemption, family, and second chances touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about the power of truth, the strength of forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds that make us human. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that's been there all along. Tell me in the comments which part of Cole and Daniel's journey resonated most with you, and share your own stories of families that found their way back to each other against all odds.